Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Tara Smith, and I am the Executive Director of Central Hall Commons, a multi-generational community center in Piscataquis County, Maine. Central Hall Commons' mission is to nurture a welcoming, inclusive, healthy, rural community culture by engaging people and organizations in the Maine Highlands region in connecting, celebrating, and learning together. We envision a community where all voices are heard and people of all generations feel safe, valued, included, and cared about. I am honored and inspired to introduce this afternoon's Common Conversation, Lessons from the Halls of Maine, the second session in our Common Purpose series, and our speaker, Craig Freshley, to guide us in this active implementation of our mission, vision, and values. The Commission on the Practice of Democratic Citizenship spent 2 years engaging with communities all over the United States to explore how best to respond to the weaknesses and vulnerabilities in our political and civic life. Its final and bipartisan report, Our Common Purpose, includes 6 strategies and 31 ambitious recommendations to help the nation emerge as a more resilient democracy by 2026. In May, Central Hall Commons hosted an introductory session to this report. With the guidance of our presenter, this afternoon, we will bring some of these gems home to Maine. Craig Freshley is the winner of the 2019 American Civic Collaboration Award for inventing Makeshift Coffeehouse, a place where conservatives and liberals gathered 40 times to understand each other. Craig will share some lessons learned about civil discourse direct from the Grange Halls, Church Halls, and Town Halls of Maine. Craig is the owner of Good Group Decisions, a consulting company based in Brunswick, and has written a book called The Wisdom of Group Decisions. Thank you so much to everyone for being here today. Craig, I pass it on to you now to lead us through this deeper dive into civil discourse and our common purpose.
Thank you. Okay, that was a really nice introduction, Tara. Thanks, and thanks for inviting me to participate with you in this. Thanks for your interest in this. I mean, this is a big topic in my heart and in the hearts of Americans across the country. Let's jump in with a screen share. I'll begin with a little story, a bit of a personal story. This was the headline that I read on my cell phone at about 3 o'clock in the morning, election day 2016. It was the morning after the election. If you can believe it, I was on my way to work with a client in Hawaii. It was the first leg of a long journey, right? I was driving through the dark to the Portland Jetport, and I couldn't help it. I just had to pull over and check in on the election result. And this is what I saw. And my heart sank. And the reason that my heart sank is it's not because my person didn't win. I'm a Democrat, but it's that I realized how divided we were. It just hit me. We are truly divided as a nation. We have had a number of recent elections that were very close. In that particular election, there was a difference between the popular vote and the Electoral College. It's a very close election. But the second thing that hit me like a ton of bricks was the increasing incivility and meanness that our nation experienced in the campaign and in the days leading up to the campaign. And now that President Trump was taking over as president of our country, it looked like incivility and what I'm just going to call downright meanness towards each other would be on the rise, because here's a leader who is not bashful about demonstrating mean behavior. So let's look at those two things a little bit. I want to show you some more here. I want to show you about Let's see, I'm realizing that I can only share one thing at a time. That's okay, we're going to get through this. First, about the political divide, and second, about what I call incivility or growing meanness. They're related, but they're two different things. By the way, my plan is to share with you a little bit of a national perspective, but then pretty quickly here, tell you the story of Makeshift Coffeehouse in Maine and some of the things that I learned. We're going to go into some breakout sessions. I'd like to give you a chance to chat about this a couple times. We'll be done an hour and a half at the latest, maybe even sooner. There'll be time for questions at the end, okay? So first of all, in terms of growing incivility, you can, growing political divide, the first thing. This is a little bit dated, but I can run the clock here a little bit. You can see the median Democrat and Republican through the years, maybe getting a little closer, but in recent years, the trend has been that the parties are getting farther apart ideologically, okay? I want to show you something else. If you believe in representative government and that our Congress is and should represent the country, take a look at this. Now, this is going to kind of not really make sense at first, but can you see all the dots on the screen? Can somebody just give me a thumbs up that you can see that? Okay, each one of these blurbs on the screen is one of our House of Representatives in Washington. Let's zone in on one. And what we have here in 1967, for instance, the Blues, the Democrats, had a majority in Congress, but we can see there is considerable overlap, right? 1969, there were many Democrats who were more conservatives than many conservatives were. There was a lot of party moderates. We had the age of Southern Democrats. As we advance in years, we can start to see our Congress getting more polarized. And this is an undeniable trend. Look at what happened in 1995, 2003, 2011. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see the more recent years. The political divide is real and it's growing. At the same time, my hypothesis goes, so is incivility or meanness, to the extent to which we are judgmental of each other and not afraid to, like I've characterized, say outright mean things about each other. I hope that I'm calling up here a report called Civility in America. Thank you, Tara. That's so helpful. I've got two monitors going on here, and it's really great. Weber Shandik is the national leader in polling about incivility and political discord. This is a little bit dated, but you can see that most 75% of Americans believe that incivility is risen to crisis levels. And look at the date, folks, that was December 2016, the month after President Trump was elected. I would venture to say it's gone a little even more severe, and I'm going to show you more recent data in a minute. There's some other interesting things about this report. You can look it up yourself, of course. But here's something that I wanted to show you. Nope, wrong page. I'm sorry, I'm jerking you around here a little bit. Let me stop the screen share and I want to show you a different document. By the way, I am going to give to you links to everything that I show you here this evening. I'll provide a link to you. In fact, I'll do that in just a few minutes. But I also want to show you this report. It's another Weber Shandik report, and this one focuses on solutions, okay? So again, I'm going to give you a link to this, and it does show more recent data. Incivility is a pervasive problem in America. There's one or two other things I want to show you here. Come on. Okay, I'm going to, oh, wait, hold on. Here we go. Hold on, I really do want to talk about this. Yeah, social media and the internet is perceived as a top source of incivility. Now, we all have this idea that social media and the internet is a source. This is pretty solid data that most Americans believe it's a serious culprit. I also wanted to call your attention to some actual solutions. First of all, not just public policy solutions, but workplace civility solutions, because incivility is rearing its head in the workplace. It's also rearing its head in municipal meetings throughout Maine. I work with a lot of town councils, boards of selectmen, and we're seeing it there too. But there are some solutions. Okay, I'm going to send you a link to this, and here's a list of things that Americans can do on a personal level to combat the growing incivility in our country. Yeah, solutions are good. I was so struck by these issues driving down 125 in the dark, headed for Hawaii. It wasn't long after that I decided to start Makeshift Coffeehouse. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that. I'm going to screen share again because I want to show you some pictures, and we'll try to look at some slides. Now, screen share is usually an extra challenge on Zoom, especially with two monitors. So let's see how this goes. Can you see the slide? It's a bunch of people talking in a Grange Hall. Yeah, and probably if you're good with Zoom, you can figure out how to see my face also in the screen. You might be able to change the size of that. If you're not accustomed to Zoom, at the top of the little videos, you might have some options for how to view. And you can also change the real estate on your screen. You can change more of what Craig is sharing, or do I want to see more of Craig's face while he's talking? There are some ways that you have control over that. But let me tell you a little about a Makeshift Coffeehouse. It's a place where I wanted to bring liberals and conservatives together to understand each other. Just that. I started one in my very own town of Brunswick. I rented the community hall in the local library, and I said, please come. Trump supporters, Trump opposers, liberals, Democrats, we're not going to try to persuade each other of anything, but we're just going to try to understand where each other is coming from. The purpose of a Makeshift Coffeehouse is to help people understand each other's political views and hang out. We had music, we had refreshments, we had downtime for people to talk in small groups, like you could see in some of these photographs. But you can see here that it's just to understand each other's political views, and that's it, an actual place. I know, amazing. But we tried it, and they actually got pretty popular. At a Makeshift Coffeehouse, we had 6 ground rules. I'm going to come back to speak from experience, but listen to understand, you know. I don't have to agree with what you say. I'm allowed to decide later what I believe myself, but this is a rare opportunity to really listen to somebody who feels very differently than I do, maybe about abortion or about guns or about immigration. Next ground rule, all views encouraged. You know, I wanted to hear from everyone, and I kind of had a little rule. I want to hear from everyone once before anybody goes twice. And I would tell the group that. And I would tell the group, I am not necessarily going to call on people in the order that I see your hands. I am a professional facilitator, so I can keep track. And I know if I've called on somebody before, and if I have, I'm going to skip them over because I want to hear all views. And when somebody speaks up who's not accustomed to speaking up in a place like, I support them, I validate them, I encourage them, and I don't put people on the spot. I make sure not to embarrass anybody. I validate and support everything that everyone says, whether I agree or not. That's not my role. All I'm there to do is help the group understand. We're not allowed to criticize each other in a Makeshift Coffeehouse. We can criticize ideas, we can criticize theories, but not people. My job is as a neutral facilitator, and I encourage people to take what they learned from a makeshift coffee house and share with others. Not just the stuff about politics, but the model behaviors. But look, it's this one, speak from experience, that was kind of magic in our makeshift coffee houses. It levels the playing field. In fact, I would tell people that I actually, in a makeshift coffee house kind of setting, I don't want to hear theory or morality or even science, because you can argue with theory and morality and science. No one can argue with your experience. If you tell your story, you're on solid ground. And when we each tell our story, we're equals. We all have an experience. And no one is to say that my life experience is any more or less valuable than your life experience. And so that ground rule all by itself tends to, like I said, I guess, level the playing field. It engenders universal kind of mutual respect. And it also, it makes a kind of easy entry. You know, anybody can come. Anybody can come and just say what it looks like from your point of view. And you know what, if you don't want to speak up, you don't have to. I'm quick to tell people that also. Some of these photographs we've been looking at, I'm just going to zip back through and tell you a little bit. This is Grange Hall in Richmond. We took a busload of Bowdoin College students up to the Richmond Grange, and we had a makeshift coffee house. And then we had a bus from the Richmond Grange down to Bowdoin College, and we had a makeshift coffee house down there. This happens to be at Bowdoin College in the student union there. This is a VFW hall someplace. There's the Richmond Grange. Let me look at some of these others. Well, I'm going to show you more pictures. We don't have to go backwards too far, but maybe once in a while I will pause and tell you about the pictures a little bit. We've had them on many different topics. Some of them were just kind of open-ended, but some of them were quite specific on guns, and you know, or on well, you can see their morality. One popular topic was patriotism. What does patriotism mean to you? What does equality mean to you? Here's a poster for a session. In every case, I partnered with a local sponsor who would help generate publicity and get the hall and the refreshments and all of that kind of stuff. At first, I did these as a volunteer. I put a huge amount of volunteer effort into this, but I did establish an advisory board. I'm very proud to note that it was co-chaired by the chair of the Democratic Party and the chair of the Republican Party. I introduced these two and had dinner with them, and they were both very supportive, and it was great to have that across party lines. As Tara mentioned in the opening, we did win the award. I got to go to Washington, and we were a national model, and that was pretty cool. Another magic thing about makeshift coffee house was that this, I've said it already, but I'm going to emphasize it a little more, is that we don't have to find common ground, or we don't have to agree. All we want to do is understand each other. And that too makes it kind of easy entry for people. I'll tell you, there's a lot of people, I got told by friends and colleagues, a lot of people were too scared to go to a makeshift coffee house. Craig, I love what you're doing, but I could never go to something like that. A lot of people, honestly, they have the attitude, I can't talk to those people. I don't want to be in a room with those people. And I totally get it. And you know what? Makeshift coffee house is not for everybody. These kinds of conversations are absolutely not for everybody. If your mind is made up and you don't even want to hear from the other people, a makeshift coffee house is not for you. And I do not discredit your legitimate fighting for your cause however you want out there. I'm all for it. I believe in writing to your senators and congressmen and legislators, and I believe in protest, and I believe in boycott, and I believe in these things within the law to fight your fight. In a makeshift coffee house, we're not there to fight. We're there to understand each other's perspectives, and that's all. I would tell people you are allowed to walk out that door with exactly the same beliefs that you walked in here with. No one is trying to change your mind. I found that I had to be very sensitive to the language that I used in promoting makeshift coffee houses. Getting people to the table is the hardest job and the first job. Once people are in the room, we could understand and talk with each other, but getting people in the room was a challenge, especially as a Democrat that I am. I made friends with Republicans. I made friends with the Republican Party leadership. I would go to the local Republican town committee of the town that I wanted to have a makeshift coffee house, explain it to them, and gain some credibility and, frankly, trust. And so I found myself kind of being my own police about neutral language and what language is either appealing or repealing to both parties. We tried some online when COVID happened. In fact, we did 13 online versions. This one happens to be about violent protest. Is violent protest ever justified? We had a police chief from Bath. We had 2 Black Lives Matter protesters. We had a recent immigrant from Somalia. It was a fascinating conversation. There's actually a recording of that at our website if you might be interested. In-person makeshift coffee houses, always food. This put on by the Grange in Richmond, and always music. I don't know. It just kind of lightens the mood and reminds us that we're human or something. Here's the Bowdoin Jazz Ensemble. Oh, here's a group of high school students. These 3 students were sophomores in high school, and they had this phenomenal jazz band. They sounded so great. They were called the Extension Chords. That was in the Camden Library. Here's a bluegrass band in the Belfast Library. We had a lot of these in public libraries. We also had them in school cafeterias. Many different places, college campuses, USM, UMaine. We had 2 on the Orono campus. We had one at UNE. We had one at Husson College. It was a good run.
Moss here. How did you put notices up in the library?
Mm-hmm.
Where else did you advertise yourselves?
Great question. So I knew that I had to advertise in places that would be appealing to all people. And so we did put them up in the library, but we also put notices up in grocery stores, in the mainstream grocery stores, in mom and pop stores. We advertised on, on social media. Now there we had a following, but what I tried to do was make inroads with leaders different than me. Again, I was a Democrat, so it was a challenge to get publicity in places where Republicans and conservatives would typically get their social media. And here comes the value of a local sponsor. And I always encourage them on the steering committee to have Democrats and Republicans on the ground floor deciding the venue and the date and the topic. You don't have one party decide those things and then invite the other party. That doesn't work. The actual crossing the political divide with makeshift coffee houses happened in the planning. And the sooner that happened, the better chance we had. And then the conservative members of that steering committee would promote it to their people. That's the ideal. And the liberal members of that would promote it to their people. They both wanted to do this, and they promoted. Didn't always work that smooth, but that's what we were going for. Karen's got a question. Yeah.
Yes, I am curious, kind of bouncing off of that question. do you find that you tend to have a pretty good mix of a variety of views? Does it, or does it tend to be mostly, liberals and Democrats participating, or do you get a lot of the opposing side as well? Because it's great when there's a good mix.
Right. So you probably didn't see it this way, but your question, you asked it two little different ways. One is, was there a good mix? I'm thinking in terms of numbers, but you also said, was there a mix of views? I'm proud to say there was always a mix of views. And even if there was, 5 Republicans and 15 Democrats, we built a good enough environment, and the lead up and the nature of the people who were there, those 5 Republicans would share and say their, so we got to, the 15 Democrats got to hear Republican views, absolutely. And the Republicans got to hear Democratic views. Now, you could say, my God, that was really unbalanced. It was, 15-5. And some of them were, many of them were unbalanced if you counted actual numbers. And most of the imbalance was more towards liberals. It wasn't always the case. We did have makeshift coffee houses that were absolutely more conservatives than liberals. It depends on where we are and who was the host. In fact, the state Republican Party hosted one. That was great. But it was a challenge, Karen. I found that for whatever reasons we can discuss, but Democrats were more naturally disposed to participate in something like that than Republicans. That's a conclusion that I could offer. Another question or reaction? Tara's got a hand up.
So I have 2 questions. One of them is about so in the beginning, you have agreements about like all voices in and all those.
Yep, those guidelines I showed you.
Yeah. So is there ever any question about those agreements?
Well, sometimes there is, and now I have to point out that we didn't actually call them agreements. Mm-hmm. I didn't ask for agreement on those. I called them guidelines, and I basically told them, this is how I'm going to run the meeting. And honestly, you have to take a strong hand as a facilitator. I'm a veteran facilitator. I'm an older white male. These things matter. I have instant credibility just by virtue of how I look. And I'm also, I don't mean to make too much of this, but I suppose that's how I handle it. And I'm very careful with all the promotional material. I don't want people to come for the wrong reasons. I say the ground rules in advance. I say, this is what we're here to do. Don't bring your gun. Don't bring your flag. That's not what, and so I've done a lot of setup, and then in the room, I say it again. This is how it works here, and I'm in charge here. And that's how I do it. I don't ask them to agree.
That's helpful. My other question is really about the difference between your experience on Zoom and in-person coffee houses, because, I feel like personally that distance between people in, relationship and sources of communication is potential ground for misunderstanding.
Yes, and it's very challenging on Zoom. We tried to pivot to Zoom. I think I mentioned we had 13 Zoom-based makeshift coffee houses, but I couldn't, let's put it this way, they weren't popular enough to pay their own way. With I could get local committees, Grange Halls or whatever, to sponsor in-person makeshift coffee houses. Zoom-based makeshift coffee house, you can go to the website right now, makeshiftcoffeehouse.com, and you'll see a little promotion for a Zoom makeshift coffee house. It asks for a donation of $400, and it says, if you want, I'll do it for free. And even with that, nobody calls me. So they're just not very popular. I don't think people want to, it's already a challenge to talk to each other about politics, and people just don't have the appetite to do it through Zoom. That's my conclusion. Yeah. Hey, I also want to hear that a little bit about the second question. Then let me just tell you this is a facilitator in me here. We're about halfway through, right? We've been at this for 45 minutes, 45 minutes to go or less. I'd like to take a couple more reactions. I want to hear from some of your conversations, why is this so hard, right? I asked you to think about why is collaborating with people. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Then I'm going to say a little more about Makeshift Coffee House and lessons that I learned, and then we'll talk some more. Okay. So for now, more reactions. Carol, you've had a hand up. Thanks for your patience.
So, Craig, I'm just wondering, after you have the makeshift coffee sessions, do you get feedback from people? Like, do they report to you what they feel they got out of it?
Yes.
I mean, if anybody came in expecting some huge change all of a sudden, they would probably be a little disappointed. This, achieving understanding with other people is sort of a slow, incremental process, I think. But what do people tell you?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. One comment I get a lot is this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, or this was really great. Thank you. I mean, people would come to me almost in tears, or they had been touched. Thank you for doing this. People hungry for that connection and scared about the political divide. So that's a reaction that I got. Thank you. Another reaction was hopeful. Wow, it's not as bad out there as I thought it was. If you only view the other side through your screen, it can look pretty bad. But when you sit down and you have a donut together and you chat, you hear that, you know what? They're like me. They're trying to raise a family, do the right thing, and it gives people a sense of hope that if I'm a Democrat, that even Republicans can be nice people, or vice versa. Because I swear we start to develop this attitude that is different and demonizes the other side. So that's a reaction that I heard was hope. I heard more than once, we need to do this in Washington. This is all great that we're having these conversations out here in the hinterlands, but what about the United States Senate? And I will tell you a story that Angus King tells many times, because let's remember, Angus King was a staffer in Washington right out of law school, and he remembers how the senators and congressmen used to interact with each other, and they used to hang out. They did not leave Washington for the weekend. They used to have barbecues together. Their kids played on the same sports teams, and so they actually saw each other at sporting events, like you all do, like we do out here in the hinterlands. But today Washington has changed. The schedule is such that the Senate adjourns on Thursday afternoon and doesn't convene until Tuesday morning, and everybody leaves Washington for the weekend. And he says that all by itself is a huge contributor to the political discord in our Congress. Thanks for letting me take you on a little tangent there, but it's a pretty good story. Leslie.
I just have a quick comment, Craig, and that is that you said that you have instant credibility. And with all due respect, I will say that works only if you're in a particular audience. And I suspect there are some audiences where that might not be true. Just saying.
That's so right. That's so right. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. It's so interesting. With a lot of audiences, I am viewed very skeptically. Yeah. Any other reactions or questions or into this question? Why is it so hard? Why today, more than 20, 50 years ago when Angus was in Washington, why is it so hard for us to collaborate? What do you all think? Jane.
Oh, well, for me, I mean, I remember having kind of pleasurable debates and banter with people of different political perspectives. Most of them were around economics. You know, you got the trickle down and the trickle up opposites. And it used to be kind of stimulating. Now it's frightening. It's just frightening. I may have gotten into situations and I start talking and the person I'm talking to just gets really angry. And it's just so unexpected that it's just, I just feel that there's so many more situations where you can't really speak what's on your mind without fear of stepping on landmines.
Escalation. That's
So
what I
that
think you're saying.
deters me,
Yeah. You're afraid that if you
especially in the last, what, 5-10 years. It's
Okay.
fearful, yeah.
more, and a lot of people are nodding. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Jane. Yeah. Other reasons. Why is it so hard? Why are we afraid to talk to each other? Yeah, Michelle. You're on
Unmute myself. It was brought up earlier, the impact of social media.
Oh yeah.
And I would say, having 4 teenagers myself, I know the impact social media can have in young people's lives and adults as well. And it's really easy to be mean today. You can pretty much say and blast out something. And I think as that barrier has kind of removed, it makes it easier. It's harder to say something mean usually to someone's face. But now that people have become so adept at slinging mud, so to speak, on social media, maybe perhaps it's even becoming easier to do that in a personal encounter like Jane had mentioned.
Right. Right. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. It's I'm sure you speak the mind of a lot of people. Yeah. There's Henry, who I'm going to say hello to. Henry joins us from Washington, D.C. He's on the Makeshift Coffeehouse Advisory Board, and it's just so fun to see you show up on the screen, Henry. Hi.
Great to see you too, Craig. I saw your note on LinkedIn, so of course I dropped by. I think that people get vested in being right, especially with some of my own family members and things like that. They make a decision about a particular topic, and they absolutely have to be right. They can't face that they might be wrong, or that their opinion might not be aligned with other people's.
Right. And so I'm going to go a step further with that. It's why is that? Why is it that people are so invested in being right, are unwilling to say, I changed my mind? Why is that a new thing?
I don't think so. No. Everyone hates to admit they're at fault or wrong or have to say sorry. So I think it's only natural. And when politics has become about score and winning and things like that, then it's being right at all costs, I guess.
Being right at all costs. Yeah. Carol, you want to weigh in?
Yes, I want to add to the conversation. I agree with what everyone is saying, but I want to add this. For me, the stakes are so high. There's climate change, there's voting rights, there's democracy, the stakes are really high. And I know that people are fearful, and I'm fearful that, if I don't want to say give in, but if I try to collaborate and reach common ground, am I giving up some really important things that are part of my core?
That's a great question, and I love how you brought it to us as a question. If I collaborate with the other side, am I giving up some things that are really important to my core? Yeah. And we can each only decide that on a case by case basis, right? That's kind of a personal decision. But that is a perfect question in my opinion. Leslie, and then Karen.
One of the things that I have, what I said in our small group, is that I find myself more angry than ever. And one of the reasons I think we can't communicate is because people who are on opposing sides of political issues have a lot of anger. And some of that for me has to do, and it's sort of related to what Carol said. I over the past several years, there's been an evolution to say that it's your truth or my truth, but they're both truth. And I guess I believe that there are some things that are true and some things that are not true. And then there are some things that are opinions. And unfortunately, in the last few years in particular, we have been barraged with untruths that are being sold as truth. And it's really hard for me not to be angry about that. Right. And when I'm talking to someone who disagrees with me and is saying something that I know is actually false, I have a hard time not being angry.
Yeah.
And my anger gets in the way of having a conversation. I mean, I admit that it becomes really an obstacle.
Yep. Thanks for saying that. And I'm not going to provide an answer or a response because you're speaking truth, and it's a dilemma that many of us face on a daily basis. Yeah. Karen had a hand up. I see that Chris is raised a hand. I'm good with this a little bit more if you are. Let's keep it rolling, and then we'll go back to a couple slides. Karen.
Yeah, conveniently, it seems like every time I have a comment, somebody says something just before that just sort of segues right into it. But actually, I do want to add to what I was going to say anyway, based on Leslie's comment about your truth versus my truth versus whatever, and who I am. And in some cases, it truly is about who they are. You can, especially consider certain issues that literally are about who a person is.
Right.
So of course that really is going to engender a lot of fear and anger when you feel like you're being attacked simply for who you are. But what I was originally going to say was about, and now if I could remember, people could become very, I think a lot of it too is about, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
We can come back.
But it's about the trust. Sorry, it's coming back now. So exactly some of the comments that have been being made about the facts or what isn't fact, misinformation and all of that. There used to be a time where people felt they could trust the news and others, or the newspaper, the TV, the whatever, that people felt they could trust those things. In the last decade, probably longer than that, it has definitely veered away from that. So it becomes very scary where you think you've got this trusted source, and in some cases people truly believe they're trusted, or in some cases they might actually be trusted. Just this morning I was listening to NPR, who was considered this really great source, and they're talking about this current issue of there is now an investigation into your origins of COVID, and talking about, well, this is what Trump and some of his people were saying ages ago, but none of us were really, we kind of dismissed it because he is so known for his misinformation that nobody really investigated. And they threw themselves in their bunch as NPR, as a crew of people who should have also looked at it more closely. So whatever that turns out to be, the point is, it all boiled down to misinformation, a lack of trust, and a fear, and rolls into all the other things that have been being said.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking these things. We've got Chris in the lineup next. I saw a hand from Henry. Go ahead, Chris.
I'll be quick. I see it as a marketing issue.
Oh.
You start off with Gilbert and Sullivan. I just looked up the quote. Every little boy and every gal that's born into the world alive is either a little liberal or else a little conservative. And you take that as a truth. And from a marketing perspective, you work on those tendencies that will say inborn. 30 years ago, William Greider wrote this wonderful book about Who Will Tell the People. And he talked about the moderating influences that were alive in the country until about then, and how they're all gone. Newspapers are gone. You can't trust the media. Religion is gone as a moderating influence these days. Labor unions are gone. So if we don't have those moderating influences, the field is open to the people who prey on us. I see us from a marketing perspective as objects to be manipulated, not necessarily for money always, but for lots of other reasons. And I see that we have become trapped in these little cells, marketing cells. And the way that we kept there is to learn how to hate people who aren't in our cell. I see those as marketing devices, and I see those as not problems with us, but as part of the basic structure of how the system works today.
Thanks for that image, Chris. That's really helpful to think of things that way. I think I understand exactly what you're saying. Henry, quick comment.
Yeah, I just a real quick commenting on what Karen said. I definitely in the last decade have grown to trust news sources far less than previously I did. And I don't know if it's because I've learned more or whether news sources have become less reliable, but it's definitely something I've noted. And one quick thing about this idea of people coming from a certain perspective in their life. I read recently a book called Rising Out of Hatred by Eli Saslow, which is actually about how the godson of David Duke, a white supremacist, spent his first 16, 17 years of life, indoctrinated in that, and then spent 2 years at a liberal arts school in Florida and completely rescinded his previous beliefs about the world. So people can change.
I bet that's pretty interesting. Henry, maybe you can write the name of that book in the chat.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. And while we're at it, I'm going to put something in the chat. I told you that I would. Let's just get this done right now. I want to check in with Tara also. First of all, let me show you. See, it says resources there in the chat. If you click on that, it will take you to a Google Doc. Okay, a separate document. It's actually a web page, and you could download that yourself, and then you'd have it on your computer. But it's a bunch of links. It's some of the things that I showed you already in this presentation, but it's more than that. It's also actually, let me say just a little bit about it. One of the things that is a link there is the makeshift coffeehouse library. And we assembled quite, I think, an impressive library of many different resources, discussion guides, videos, all kinds of stuff. So if you really are interested in this stuff and you want one thing to look at, that would be my suggestion, and spend a little time. You can organize things at the library at there's boxes at the top. You can click on what types of resources you want. So thanks for letting me put that in the chat, and just remind you that's all available to you. Henry's put in the name of the book and the author. Thanks so much for that. Tara, were there some questions from Facebook? I know you put something in the chat. Go ahead.
I don't think that any questions from Facebook have come in yet. I just had the thought that if folks want to receive info after this and are willing to put their email into the chat, their name and email, we can send any resources and the recording to you.
Great. Okay, right. You could so maybe you, Tara, could download that document from Google Doc and make it available to others. Awesome. That's really great. Okay. Well, look, let me show you a last couple things here. My clock says it's 5:07, so we've got about 20 minutes left. And I think I'd like to share with you just a little bit more, maybe just one more slide here, actually. I guess that's about it. Yeah, why don't I just share this last slide with you. It's what I call lessons learned from a makeshift coffee house. This is these are my takeaways, and the first is that whether I agree with them or not, or whether I like it or not, every person has a good reason for what they believe. And I'm going to say, especially political views. You know, somebody was talking earlier in our conversation about identity, and how when one's identity is threatened or judged against, that's particularly threatening or fearful. And a political view has a lot to do with identity. We get our political views largely from our parents and our ancestries, or from people who have made a big impression on us. And so my point is that I've learned that somebody doesn't take a political stand without having thought about it, you know, and I just have to assume. In fact, even for practical reasons, I can't go wrong if I assume that they have a good reason for what they believe, and honestly, it's going to help me deal with that person if I can understand the reason. So that is always my next step. Well, what is the reason? What makes that person tick? It's harder for me to hate you when I've heard your story. President Carter used to tell the story of Camp David and knowing the names of each other's grandchildren, right? World leaders in peace negotiations and the personal experiences. It works for world leaders. It also works for neighbors and any kind of people, especially people different from us. When I have the openness to really hear stories from different than me, it's great. Hey, look, one little advertisement. Remember I told you I started this by looking at my cell phone in the car on the way to Hawaii. I went to Hawaii and I did a speech and I facilitated a bunch of stuff. And while I was out on a bike ride, I made a video about hearing other people's stories, because I met a woman on a bus, on a public bus in Honolulu. And the advertisement part is you can look up that video and you can find it at my website, craigfreshley.com. I've posted lots of videos and I think it's called something like Listen to Somebody Different. But there's many stories in the world of the magic that happens when we just take time to listen to people different. It's not us versus them, it's just us. We're on the same team. And this is the part that truly saddens me most about the situation that we're in. We are fellow Americans. We are on the same team. Sometimes I'm dismayed that we don't have a common cause, you know? I mean, I wasn't alive then, but it seems to me that the last time the country really came together was in World War II, right? We had a common cause. An enemy dropped a bomb on Pearl Harbor, you know, and that drew us into the war, and our allies were suffering. And Americans, looking back from a very distant view like I am, but it looks to me like Americans put down their differences and fought a common cause. And as a liberal Democrat, I was hopeful that climate change would be our common cause. I was hopeful that it would contain economic and business opportunities for conservatives, and it would be a perfect enemy for liberals, and it would unite us. But it hasn't happened, and I don't know what the common cause is, and it saddens me because we're on the same team. To avoid war with each other, we have to talk with each other. And this is why coming to the table is so important. If we're not willing to even come to the table and talk, then the only other alternative is to, you know, launch things either through social media or in reality. So like all diplomats know, the most important thing is to stay at the table, stay in conversation. Don't walk away. And it's hard. Some of you in this conversation have expressed the fears, and some of us are in hard relationships with friends, with work colleagues, with loved ones, where we want to walk away. I want to walk away sometimes, and sometimes I need to temporarily, but there's got to be a way to talk if we want to make progress. I'm allowed to honor your beliefs without changing my beliefs. This is a wonderful concept. I'm allowed to go into conversation with somebody very differently. Doesn't mean I'm going to get converted. I don't need to be threatened by that. And just as a practical matter, demonstrate respect always. It really goes a long way. It goes an especially long way with an adversary. Okay, those are my lessons learned. Any questions or reactions? Chris?
Tara, why don't we put the campaign together to get a bunch of liberals and a bunch of conservatives together to do exactly one of these programs? Craig, do you have a cookbook for this?
Do I have a cookbook?
Yeah, to make this thing happen.
We do have a bit of a cookbook. This was very popular at one time, and we held a training for makeshift coffeehouse facilitators, a whole day thing. And as a result of it, we wrote some guidelines for sponsors and to facilitate. Yeah. You know, I didn't explain this part of it, but makeshift coffeehouse has a 501c3 fiscal sponsor. We have a charitable nonprofit who has agreed to handle our money for us. We do take charitable donations, and it's been a really great arrangement. Rather than start our own nonprofit and whatnot, we went this route. The group is called the Friends of the Maine State Library. It's a very nice partnership because we do a lot of these in libraries, and this, you know, across the differences education is very much in the wheelhouse of what libraries, how libraries serve their communities. So it's been a great partnership, and when people do want to make a contribution, that's how we handle it. And you can see how to do that at our website. I'm not asking for money, folks. I just wanted to explain that piece of the puzzle. Any other questions or reactions to anything we've discussed?
I'll just make a comment piggybacking on Chris's suggestion. And yes, I do believe we should get together more. You know, I think that this year has been really obviously difficult for all of us on many levels, but this goes beyond this year, right? And I feel like a lot of what we're referring to is about not being in relationship with each other, in person, in relationship with each other, sitting down together, breaking bread, listening to music, you know, looking at each other with all of our senses, smelling each other, seeing each other, touching each other. You know, I think we need that, and our culture is really getting further and further away from it, and it's really hurting us all. So yes, Chris, let's do this, and I hope, you know, everybody on this meeting can help to reach out in the community so that we can connect again